If you search for today's guest on Twitter, you'll find 6 classroom expectations. Have a vision, be a learner, not a finisher, lean into struggle, feed your passion, own your education, own our culture. We discuss all this and more next. Hello and welcome to 1% Better. I'm your host, Joe Ferraro. You're in the right place if education means more to you than the 4 walls of a classroom. It's a lifestyle, it's a movement, and I'm here to help you get a little bit better before you go to sleep tonight. Welcome to regular listeners, of course. Your support on this journey means everything. This is episode 54, and I'm so glad to be here. A special hello to all first-time listeners, those joining me from the impressive tribe being led by today's guest. Thrilled to share my conversation with Amy coming up. But before I do, a few places to consider for all first-timers. The hub of everything is 1percentbetterproject.com. That's where you can sign up for 1% Wednesday, a free weekly note that keeps you up to date, as well as a short original video in your inbox every Wednesday. Twitter is where I found today's guest. And you can find me at Ferraro on Air. It's Ferraro. Also, same handle on Instagram if you prefer. If that's not your speed, email me. Get1percentbetter@gmail.com. Now, Amy Fast. Today's conversation caps a month of thoughts, ideas, questions, and guests that I couldn't respect more. I found Amy's work 2 years ago, and our conversation features everything I like about her. Lifelong learning, messy, hands-dirty thinking at times. I think you'll hear in her answers sincerity, and at times some struggle with really difficult questions. Sometimes we forget that schools are in the people business, and with that comes the frequent feeling of being pulled in multiple directions at once. Amy and I weren't searching for polished, rehearsed sound bites. I was hoping she would roll up her sleeves and share her experiences from her research and her daily life in a school. I think she did just that. If you enjoy the conversation, share it with someone you know. And that's that. Sit back and get 1% better with Amy Fast. When you host a show called 1% Better, it's always a thrill to talk about learning. How do we set up the environments for learning? What are the best conditions in which students and adults learn? Today I went out and found someone that I met on social media and have been nothing but impressed. It's one of the great examples of social media doing its job, connecting like-minded folks and getting to have conversations like this. It's my pleasure to bring in Dr. Amy Fast. Amy.
Hi, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this has been great. I started with a little Twitter mention, and you're at Fast Crayon. Why did you join Twitter? Because it seems like a medium that is so perfect for you.
Yeah, and I would say I didn't really have, unfortunately, a noble purpose when I started. I'd been on social media for quite a while, but mostly just for personal reasons to connect with people that I hadn't seen in a while. And when I wrote my book, my publishers, part of the contract was to promote it on social media, for me to do that as well. And I didn't feel comfortable doing that on my private social media accounts, and I actually don't feel comfortable with self-promotion at all. And so you won't really ever see me posting anything about my book on Twitter, but I thought, well, I can post about the ideas in my book, and if the ideas have merit, then and people are interested in them, then maybe that's good enough in terms of what the publisher expects. And so I just started posting some of the some real concise, obviously 140 character thoughts that I had regarding public education. And I wrote the book obviously because I wanted to make a dent in a public education policy in our country. And what I found is those ideas just started resonating with people. And I realize now that I probably have a larger sphere of influence on Twitter than I did writing a book. And so oftentimes people will say on Twitter, like, oh, I'm gonna go out and buy your book. And I'm like, don't really bother, because you can kind of just read my feed and you'll get kind of the Cliff Notes version of my ideas. And If you still want something more in depth, then go ahead. But so that's originally how I got on it. And then, of course, when I saw the value in networking with people who were really, masters of their craft and leaders of the various platforms, it was kind of addicting to me, because it's hard to be around that kind of greatness and not want to tap into it more. So I mean, that's how I got on it, and I've been on it for about 3 years. And I was surprised at the kind of traction I got out of the gate, and so it was pretty fun.
Yeah, at the time of air, almost 35,000 Twitter followers, not typical of a school administrator or a former teacher, and actually in this case, a current teacher. I know that you're a lifelong learner and teacher. The book is, it's the mission, not the mandates, defining the purpose of public education. Amy, you weren't kidding when you said you don't like self-promotion. Telling people not to buy the book is not what I'm recommending here. I am not recommending listeners not buying the book, but what you're really scratching into is the idea that you seem to have a noble purpose. That was what your dissertation was about, and it seemed to me, at least to my mind, that lent itself very nicely into your book.
That was a fun process as well, because I didn't realize when I was writing the book that I was writing a book, so I only submitted it to one publisher. And then I heard back in a week, and they offered me a contract. And I also never really thought that anyone would read it other than my mom. And so it's kind of cool, because it's also something that keeps me grounded. When I wrote it, I was a teacher, and like you said, now I'm an administrator. And so what I love is that that it's pretty transparent who I am and what I stand for, and it's so public that I can't ever, my why can never become broken, because if it does, I have a lot of people now across the country and across the world that will call me out, and so that's been kind of a cool side effect of publishing the book as well.
Yeah, some form of a social contract there for sure. On this show, we talk about the mindset, language, and behavior of self-improvement, of personal growth, and certainly your work touches all that. The reason I opened with Twitter is because, to my mind, you put out sort of mini essays in 140 characters, and you said it earlier, it gains a lot of resonance, and it's something that I want to direct all our listeners to go follow, because whether or not you're in the educational space, you have kids, you have people in the community, and all of your work talks about improving communities, improving people beyond the scope of it. Exactly. You don't seem at all convinced that education should be something, especially in the public sector, for economic gain. You almost rally against the idea that the educational system is a little bit is broken. I mean, in fact, at one point in your writing, you say that the public education system is floundering, and your argument in your book basically pins the idea that we need to find a better way. And to kind of open things up, I wonder what in your concise way is the better way to improve public education?
Yeah, so I don't think this is a very popular idea, and it took me a lot of research to kind of uncover what my heart and my gut was telling me for years doing this work. And I just want a little disclaimer here is that people who know me and knew me as a teacher, I'm all about high expectations, and I push people as hard as I love them. And sometimes in my writing, I think I get accused of being a little bit fuzzy or warm and fuzzy. And while that's true that I believe in a lot of the intangibles of success, I'm also a really big proponent of education, pushing people to be their best. But that aside, everyone assumes that, and this has been true for a while, the purpose of public education is to increase academic skills and knowledge. And my whole book is about how that purpose is pretty misguided, and not that we want ignorant citizenry at all, but really to unlock a human being's potential involves so much more than academic skills and knowledge. And I talk about the intersection of those academic skills as well as someone's internal drive, and then those foundational skills of like social intelligence and organization and time management and ethics and all those other seemingly hard to measure pieces that really we need to be spending so much more time on in education in order to like grow some really solid humans. So I guess that would be kind of the big picture of my book and also the big picture of my message.
Yeah, and you do supply plenty of research to go around. In the book, you cite Daniel Goleman, his work on emotional intelligence. You talk about emotional intelligence being as much as 2 times more important in predicting success and future outcomes than cognitive ability and achievement alone. It would seem to me, and to all smart listeners listening, that would be the only piece of data you need to convince people
Right.
of your mission, but yet we do find friction with your mission. Why is that?
I think because people assume that this notion of social emotional learning and academic achievement as being somewhat mutually exclusive, and that's so bogus. And it's and we also tend to, in education, we want outcomes, we want data, we want effect size, we want numbers, and so we gravitate toward what's easy to measure, and academic achievement is easy to measure on some level, but I look at that as effect data. So that's maybe something that we can capture in a picture and say, this is how schools are doing. But really, what we need to be spending more time on is cause data. And usually the students who are reaching high academic standards have so many other skills at play that they've either learned at home or learned somewhere along the line that allows them to access their education better than students who haven't. And so that emotional intelligence piece, if we started to invest way more into that aspect of education, I argue that we'll get even stronger academic outcomes as a result. And so I think that the sad truth about education is that what gets tested gets taught, and it's not because teachers don't have integrity or aren't making decisions from a noble place, but it's simply because we when we're in the weeds on the day to day, we kind of even though our gut tells us what's important, when our principals or in our districts are constantly giving feedback on this one aspect of growing humans, then we continue to put our investments and our efforts into doing better on that measure, and in turn we kind of miss the mark in terms of investing in the biggest bang for our buck when it comes to growing some really solid humans, like I said. So yeah, I'm with you. I think the research is pretty clear, and not only that, but I think the reason that that what I have to say is resonating with a lot of people isn't just because the research is clear, but it's because it's what they're experiencing on the day to day with their own children, their own students, and even themselves. And like you said, it's weird to have an educator have that much traction on social media, but in reality, education is about making people better. And that has so much more more impact than in just the field of education. Obviously, that's in everyone's personal lives, that's in everyone's professional lives, that's in coaching, that's in the business world. And so I love that there's this merging now between what we do in the field of education and what's happening outside the field of education, because we stand to gain a lot from learning from others in other industries and in other fields. And I think other fields stand to gain a lot from learning what we do in the field of education.
I'm talking with Dr. Amy Fast. Amy, from a systemic level, it's hard to fight and figure out solutions sometimes. But I wonder, from a practical level and a very applicable level, what's one way that a teacher, parent, or leader listening right now could begin to show more credence towards emotional intelligence in their classrooms or in their places of business?
Right.
What's one very tangible way that they could do that?
Sure. So I actually I do start with the measure, and I think that's where teachers should start as well. In order to figure out how we can help students, we need to figure out where we're at right now in terms of helping them. And so a big push that I always have is on elevating student voice. And so I always say, we need to start by asking the students. That should be our most important measure in schools. We should be asking them about how hopeful they are about their futures. We should be asking them about how significant they feel in the school community and in their own communities, the level of challenge and relevance and autonomy that they have in their classes, and how affirmed they feel about themselves. Like, do they feel known in their classes? And that's the real starting point. So then as a teacher, if I'm asking those questions, whether it's through a student survey or some other means, and I kind of get the big picture snapshot of, well, here's where I'm doing well as a teacher. Most of my students feel challenged, but maybe they don't feel like the learning's very, relevant, or maybe they don't feel affirmed or known. And so I can start by diving into how can I help? How can I do better on that front? And then I can also get the barometer on each student. So if one student in particular is struggling in a certain area, and they comment on why they're struggling, and then I can work to personalize what that student needs in the way that I give instruction. So asking students is always the first step in my mind in terms of changing our instruction so that students feel more engaged and empowered in the learning. And then in terms of social emotional learning, honestly, and this is kind of this isn't probably as practical of an answer as you would like, but I think the research points to the best way that we can explicitly teach social emotional learning is to explicitly model it and make time for it. And so it starts with teachers being the best versions of themselves every day. I'm sorry, it sounds a little bit cheesy, but really modeling what it means to have empathy, and modeling what active listening is, and then call it out and say, this is what I'm attempting. This is what I'm trying to do, because I'm trying to help you see X, Y, or Z, or I'm trying to be better at X, Y, or Z. And so making it more explicit in schools, and also making sure that teachers are being the models for our students that we want to see from them is for sure the best way. And then obviously providing relevant learning experiences so that students can actually utilize those skills that we want to develop in them. So if we're really focusing on, a student being able to have empathy, or be a good listener, or collaborate well with others, we need to provide them the opportunities to make those things happen, and to lean into those skill sets. So
I love it. Yeah, the student perception surveys, you say that you give to all 2,200 students in your high school.
We do.
And
we do.
While you were speaking, I thought about a potential role play situation where a veteran teacher is speaking with you, and they're reluctant to administrate these surveys. It doesn't sound like that's an issue at your school. I read a lot about the culture at your school, and I'm sure there's places where you still want to grow. But imagine now that someone listening works at a school where you have a veteran teacher, that things seem to be pretty effective, but maybe it's that second half of their career. Now, I'm always interested in what conversations sound like. If I came to you, and you're my administrator, Amy, and I say to you, Amy, you guys give that to 2,200 students. I don't know if that would work here. What does our conversation sound like? So let's go back and forth. So, Amy, I'm very reluctant to give a survey to my students.
So you're coming to me as a classroom teacher, correct?
Yeah, I'm a classroom teacher. I'm entering year 20, and I'm saying, Amy, a survey, once I give the student survey, I'm very, very hesitant about that.
Yeah. So I guess I'd ask what's making you reluctant? I'd start there.
You know what it is, Amy? It's like I've been doing this for so long, and I feel like I'm the expert in the room. And all these classes, all this learning that I've done, I really feel confident in the product that I'm putting out there.
Right. So this is actually something that, as administrators, I'm sorry, I'm not engaging in the actual role here, and I'm talking as a side note. But this is something that we actually hear quite often, and the trick is that I also have to model as an administrator that no matter how competent I get at certain things, that growing is part of what this profession's all about. And so we often turn that back on teachers in terms of, we also want to validate the places where they're shining as teachers, and a lot of veteran teachers are fantastic. And so honestly, like, giving the student survey then should just be validation of how great they are. on one. So that's oftentimes just for the sake of affirming your practice. It's a great practice to engage in, because teachers don't get enough affirmation on a daily basis, and so just by virtue of affirming their practice, a student survey is a great idea. But also, as teachers, we need to model the continued growth we expect of our students. So if a student is mastering the standards in our classrooms, we don't stop teaching them. We don't say, all right, it's October and you've arrived, so now you can leave and be done for the year. And so making that mission transparent to teachers, so that they understand that growth and risk-taking and failure are all part of kind of our gig, and that no one has arrived at any point in this game of growing humans. No one's ever there. And so so I would suggest to teachers that that continued growth, modeling that for our students, like I said before, with modeling the soft skills, is holding that mirror up to your own practices. If we want our students to do that, and we want our students to never feel like they've reached that endpoint, then we also need to put our money where our mouth is and do the same thing. And I wouldn't say it in those terms to teachers, but I think that the power of modeling is huge, what we expect of our students, and doing that ourselves. And then also there's no harm in doing a practice and only getting affirmation out of it. Like even if you're the best teacher in the world and 100% of your students say everything you do is perfect, don't change a thing, that in itself is good enough reason to give the survey. You deserve to hear that you're doing a good job. But I'll tell you that this is not a craft that is mastered. It's just not. It's like someone saying, I'm the perfect parent. And so I think that there's a lot more to that conversation with the teacher than just convincing them that they should ask their students about their perceptions. I mean, this is really now, like you said, a mindset issue. And to feel like you've arrived in teaching is that there's a lot to unpack with that mindset, and there's a lot of danger. There's a lot of danger there for sure, and there's probably a lot of there's some reasons why someone would feel maybe fearful or defensive in order to take that stance, and I'd want to unpack that a lot more than just convincing a teacher that they should give the survey.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And in researching for our conversation, you are a big champion of teachers. There's no doubt about it. As much as you are student-centered, you can see it right from the Twitter feed and from your writing that teachers are the lifeblood of what you guys do. So I definitely recognize that. You did write something that stopped me in my tracks, and I loved it. And I wanted you to speak a little more on it if you would. You wrote, "Every kid deserves to have a thing they are known for. If not, they'll create one." Really beautiful piece of writing. What did you mean by that?
Well, so I don't know if, everyone puts as much stock into some of these motivational speakers that I listen to as I do, but I am, a big Tony Robbins fan, whether I want to admit that or not. And he talks about these motivators in people's lives that we all need. And one is certainty and one is uncertainty. So you kind of need some stability in your life, and you also need some excitement and a little bit of drama just to, get excited about living. And then there's the sense of belonging. And then a really important one is significance. Everyone needs to feel significant. Everyone needs to feel somehow like they matter. And so the fastest way to feel like you matter is honestly to raise some hell. It's to commit an act of violence or to do something that gives you power over someone else. And so a lot of times our students who, join gangs or get in fights in the hall or, cuss out a teacher or a peer, these are students who are desperate to feel significant in some way. And we don't do a good enough job in schools in terms of helping individual students see how they uniquely matter. And when someone feels important, they want to invest more in that place that's making them feel important. And so if we can't give students a positive outlet to show them that they're significant, or for them to demonstrate their worth and that they matter, then they're going to find one themselves. And so school is more than just about like shoring up people's deficits, but it's also about like, where do you uniquely shine as a human being, as an individual? And then how can I not only bring that out in you and like harness that and expand upon that, but also how can I hold a mirror up to it and show you, your potential for greatness, so that you get excited about that and don't feel the need to find that significance in some other venue. Because I think, I think we tend to label, people and kids as like either good or bad, or, someone who is moral or immoral. And really there's, every human wants to matter, and everyone's going to find that way, some way or not. And some of us have just had more opportunity to hear from people around us what makes us great than others have. And so I'm a huge proponent of not just shoring up deficits in schools, but also that strengths-based approach with kids.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I quote Tony Robbins pretty frequently on the podcast. I particularly like when he talks about the quality of your questions. Who else, we're about halfway through our conversation, who else is on the Amy Fast reading list or must-listen-to list?
So Sean Aker, I don't know if you've read The Happiness Advantage and Big Potential.
No.
He's a big inspiration behind a lot of the research and writing I do. I'm a big Seth Godin fan.
Nice.
I enjoy his work for sure. Dan Pink, he's the one that talks about the keys to unlocking motivation with autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And like I said, I'm a big Tony Robbins fan too. So I really like to dig into positive psychology. And like I said, I like looking at what makes businesses work in various organizations, but even more so, I like kind of uncovering the research about what makes people tick. And that's a lot of the reading I do is not in the field of education, but it's in psychology and those other platforms. And so I think that's where a lot of what I do, the inspiration behind what a lot of what I write about and a lot of the research I do comes from.
Yeah, regular listeners are smiling as they know Dan and Seth have been guests on the podcast, and Sean is someone whose work I'll have to dive into after the show. I also know that in some of your writing you talk about Simon Sinek's work, starting with Why.
Oh yeah, I should have included him. Absolutely, that was the foundation of my book. So yes, he's a huge inspiration behind a lot of the work that I do.
And as you enter the school year this year, and for teachers and leaders listening, how do you double down on your why, or do you shift it? How without being self-serving, how do you get 1% better going into this school year?
Oh gosh, I mean, I'll speak for myself, and then I'll try to speak a little more broadly for the other educators out there. I found that I got pretty unhealthy this year, and I kind of carried the weight of the world on my shoulders. And I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, and I try to be everything to everyone, and I just in turn just didn't take care of myself. And so really, in terms of getting ready for next year, for me right now, it's all about trying to take care of myself. I'm trying to get healthy. I'm trying to work out every day. I'm trying to, spend time with my kids without my phone in hand, and just those things that make me feel like I'm walking my talk, and it's really difficult work when you're trying to improve the human condition and you're not improving your own self. And so I realized that I felt like a bit of a fraud this year. I'm trying to work on making educators better, making students better, and I'm just like a shell of a human being in the process. And so that was a big wake up call for me, that I'm gonna burn out pretty fast, or I'm gonna not be as effective, or not be not even be the person who I'm claiming others should be if I don't stop and take care of myself. So that's what I'm doing, and I think anyone who's in my same boat owes it to themselves, and even owes it to the people that they're serving to do the same. And then in terms of getting ready for the school year, I like what you said about like kind of reflecting on and grounding yourself in your why, and that's something that is always been a huge part of my process and the process that we have in the schools that I work in, and that's just reminding yourself, what am I all about? What are we all about? And why are we here? Why are we doing this work? because sadly it's pretty easy to lose sight of in the midst of all the mandates and initiatives that roll out. And I think the best way to do that, honestly, is to have really great friends who will call you out. And I have a few of those, and it's been such a blessing to work with people who aren't afraid to be honest with you and aren't afraid to give you feedback that you need to hear and that helps you grow. And so if I ever start to veer away from my why, my coworkers will call me out, and it's just what's needed.
Thank you for being so vulnerable. That's a very important thing for teachers and parents to hear. I would point you, Amy, and certainly anyone who's feeling the same way to the work of Dave Stewart Jr. He does some work on social media, but his book has just come out, and it talks about teacher burnout in maybe the most compassionate way that I've seen. So it's Stewart, Stuart, for those who may be feeling a little bit of what you're feeling. I really appreciate you kind of giving us that glimpse. That means a lot.
Of course, yeah.
As we look into speaking to parents, it's a huge stakeholder in this whole process when you think about that triangle in terms of student, teacher, parent, and of course administrators, and underpinning the whole thing in some ways. If you had a chance to speak to parents on more of a global platform here, what would be something that you kind of wish they understood about the profession, or one way that they could help make your job a little bit easier and their kids a little more successful?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one.
Yeah.
I'm a parent myself. I have a to-be fourth grader and a to-be fifth grader. And it's this. I don't want to say this because it's going to make me sound like a horrible parent. But in some ways, my kids' teachers know them in a different way than I know them, and that way that the teachers know them is not more shallow than the way I know them, or not as in depth as the way I know them, but it's different. And love can do weird things to people. Like, think about your first romance where you're head over heels in love, and that person could do no wrong, even though they actually maybe could, and you think they're perfect. And I think sometimes as parents we not that our kids aren't perfect, and that every child doesn't deserve to be given the assumption of best intent. But I think sometimes we can be a little bit blinded to, things that are actually happening with our kids, and we want to save them from the world instead of allowing them to feel some discomfort. And discomfort is like one of the greatest gifts we can give our children, because it allows them to grow. You stepping outside your comfort zone is probably the most important piece to growing soft skills and to becoming an educated person. So I would just say for myself and all other parents out there is, try not to save your kids from discomfort. If a teacher is offering insight into the inner workings of your kid's mind or their behavior, that teacher likely spends as much, if not more, time with your child than you do. And so, and they're a professional who's in this gig because they love children and therefore love your kid. And so, give them the benefit of the doubt. I think we need to work more as partners and less as, sometimes it can feel like it's an us versus them, and both parties want what's best for the child. And so I think assuming best intent for sure. And then also, sometimes it's super hard, but allowing your kid to be uncomfortable for a little bit and leaning into the teacher's advice and giving it a shot, because they might be seeing things at school that either we're not seeing at home, or maybe we're a little bit in denial about at home. And that's a hard pill to swallow, I know, but it's also such an important step in being the village that raises these kids together, when we can just try to assume best intent and give what they're saying a shot. So I would say what I would ask from parents is the assumption of best intent, for one. Know that we love your kids, and know that if we're asking something of you that's going to make your kid uncomfortable, it's because we love them, not because we're this evil enemy who's trying to make your life hard or your child's life hard. And so I think that's the one piece of advice I'd give.
And with that spirit in mind and looking back, what was it that your sixth grade teacher, Mr. Gilmore, saw in you or that you saw in him that made it all the difference for you?
What did you read that you uncovered that? That's impressive.
Thanks.
So Mr. Gilmore was probably not like, if you read my posts, he wouldn't be the teacher that personifies them at face value. He was an ex-military guy. He wore like cowboy boots to school every day, and jeans, and was pretty like gruff. Would get pretty serious and pretty stern with his class. But I, in sixth grade, would stay up till 3 in the morning studying for tests because I wanted to make him proud. And it wasn't easy to do, but when you did, it meant something. And he was the first person that I was always kind of referred to as like a funny little girl, like, oh, she's a cute, funny little girl. And he was in a parent-teacher conference with my mom, and I forget what she said, but he said something like, she's not just a cute little girl, Vicki, she's a scholar, and it's, you need to treat her as such. And so he thought of me as someone with, important things to say and insightful, and he called me a scholar, and he expected a lot of me. And I remember he told us he loved us, and it was like toward the end of the year, and he got kind of teary when he said it. And I just think he really embodied like what it was to be someone who cares for and raises kids. He's that parent that pushes you hard and loves you hard. And I think that's, after having him, I realized that being a teacher was about so much more than just helping, someone get better at math and reading, but it was really about showing kids that you believed in them and pushing them to be the best version of themselves, and to be in their corner. And so he's always stuck with me, and is to this day remains that teacher that gives me the inspiration that I need to keep going on my hard days.
Yeah, and I can hear the emotion in your voice.
Yeah, I feel it thinking about it. It was a good question.
Well, thanks. The idea struck me recently when I was at my daughter's preschool graduation. So in some ways, it's almost a little comical that there's a preschool graduation at all. But what struck me as an image, which was a picture of my daughter on the lap of her teacher. And I thought about the fact that teacher will be in every picture for the rest of this kid's lives, for all her kids' lives. So as they're going to high school graduation and that picture comes out from preschool, and, it's not necessarily my job here as an interviewer to kind of inject that, but I wonder if we could close with that idea of the responsibility of a teacher is so heavy when you think about it like that. You are in the picture for the rest of time. Your student, your children will remember what that teacher made them feel like and what they taught them for the rest of time. So I wanted to release this episode at a time where teachers and leaders and professionals and parents could feel hopeful and inspired. And you talk about love, you talk about hope in your work, but you also talk about the science. So there's not really an elegant question there, Amy, to close with, but
I love it.
I wonder if there's a way that you can echo a little bit of what I said in closing.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I don't think I could say it better than you just did. I think the hard part for teachers is that we often don't get to see the fruits of our, and we're often kind of this rung of the on the ladder that we call life and education, and we don't see the other steps that our kids take. We pass them off to the next person and hope that they do their best and care for our kids the way that we did. And so for teachers, I think it's easy to get overwhelmed in the work because we don't have that instant gratification in a day and age where we thrive on instant gratification of the outcomes of the work that we do. And so to just remember what you said, that you're going to be a piece of this person for the rest of their life, and what part do you want to play in that, and what is the most important and profound work that you can do to resonate with that person for the rest of their life. It's probably not teaching them an algorithm. It's probably being that kind of teacher that Mr. Gilmore was for me. And that's really at the heart of the work that I do.
Yes, no matter how many authors I interview, no matter how many business professionals or anyone who's quote unquote successful, my background's in education, and I'm always going to be loyal and protective over those who do that work. I think it's some of the most important work there is. And when I went out to seek you out as a guest, I was honored that you said yes, and I knew that you would bring a lot of value to listeners. So I do want to say, Amy, I want to be respectful of your time. You have a school to help lead, and I just want to thank you sincerely for the time that you've invested today.
Thank you as well. It was fun talking with you.
She's Dr. Amy Fast. The book is It's the Mission, Not the Mandates, Defining the Purpose of Public Education. But I'm going to direct you right away to @FastCrayon, one of the best Twitter follows, whether or not you're in education or not. We thank Dr. Amy Fast for joining us today.